So, the good news is I don't have to introduce EEFIG anymore because that has been done before, and I don't have to introduce why we did all that stuff, so I can go directly in the middle and present to you what we did in the DEEP platform. So you have the slides here, they will be uploaded so you can reread it. And one of the major motivations why the Commission asked a project consortium to build, together with the EEFIG, the DEEP database, was that in the first EEFIG phase, the lack of evidence on the performance of energy efficiency investments was identified as one of the major barriers towards investments in energy efficiency. And providing that information was the main rationale behind building the de-risking energy efficiency platform with the DEEP database. And so I'm going to present you the database, a little bit of background and a lot of results. But the best thing is just experience it yourself. So just go to deep.efig.eu and play around with the database. It's really a good thing we have developed here with the great support of a lot of projects, a lot of data contributors, and there's a lot of useful information, and I can just give you a glimpse of what you can do with that, and you can do really a lot of great stuff with the database. So it was launched in 2016 in cooperation with the Commission's launch of the Clean Energy for All Europeans package, and has been updated since with new data provided by the different actors, and I will also talk about the role of EUMERCI in that process. It's an open source database, so the code is open source. It has been provided to the Commission at the end of the project, and is available in a variety of languages. The data covers about 10,000 projects we have in the database, a lot of information about them. So, of course, information is about the type of project, the sector which is covered, the type of measure which has been implemented in that sector, energy consumption data, financial indicators, and some more qualitative indicators, for example, about multiple benefits in there. When we started the project, we had a great idea. I remember the meeting when we were compiling the data collection sheet, and we ended up with more than 100 indicators we wanted to collect. And I was always a bit skeptical about that, from my experience about evaluating programs, and said, hey guys, if we receive 5 main indicators for each project, we'd be happy. If we receive the other 95, great, but 5 minimum indicators which are necessary for evaluating the projects. And they are given here. I mean, we need to have some information about country, whether it's a measure in building industry, which measures are in, so some sort of classification of the measure. The investment, energy saving in euros or energy saving in kilowatt hours. I mean, having both is great. And the question whether the savings have been independently verified. So this is the absolute minimum requirement we wanted to have for everything. We still lack some of the information for all the data points, but we could do some good analysis with that. By December 2017, where also our accompanying project for the EEFIG group ended with the project consortium, we had data from more than 10,000 projects in the database, around about 5,000 in buildings, around about 5,000 in industry, contributed by more than 25 data providers. And as you can see it here on the slide, I will mark it on all projectors. EUMERCI was one of them. And I'll say something about the figures later in the slide. When we are talking about the distinction between buildings and industry, the distinction is sometimes a bit arbitrary, because we have in the building segment of our projects, half of the building are again in industry and commercial buildings. So in total, when we count it together, we have 7,500 projects which somehow deal with industrial projects, but we have made the distinction specifically between buildings and industrial projects, which also cover service sector and so on and so on, but we didn't find a better word for that. So it's a lot about industry in that database. A lot of data providers, different contributors. Some provided only a handful of projects, some contributed a couple of thousands of projects, and we have quite a comprehensive coverage of the EU. You see a split down of the projects by country. So most of the projects come from Germany. I mean, it's no surprise, being the largest country in the EU, that a lot of countries can come from there. Equally distributed among buildings and industry, but also UK, Poland, Austria have contributed a lot of projects. And those figures from UK, Poland, Austria, for example, are thanks to EUMERCI data. as well as the Italian data, which has mainly been contributed by EEFIG. So more than 2,000 projects, so nearly a fourth of the projects in this database has been contributed by EEFIG. And thank you again at that point for supporting us and the database by that, because in industry it really helped build up the database. Some important fact about that data we received from EEFIG. So we already had 8,000 projects in the database when we received the EEFIG data. And then we were a bit skeptical what would happen to our main indicators if we include such a huge new data set from different countries, different sectoral coverage. And the surprise was the main indicators didn't change at all. So we had quite a stable data set already with our 8,000 projects, and it didn't change very much regarding payback, regarding avoidance cost, and so on and so on. So we saw, yeah, we have created already quite a stable statistical basis with what we have here. So, I mean, you can say now, why did we include the EEFIG data? Indicators didn't change. Yeah, but we had new sectors covered, we had new technologies covered, we had new countries covered, and we had the proof and the evidence that we have stable indicators. I mean, that's a really great result that we can say, yeah, we can really work with this data. It's reliable data on which we can start new initiatives and hopefully develop it further. So the overall results split into the two sectors, buildings and industry, and always remember how the building projects is industrial building projects, and so I'm allowed to talk about that here too. So the median paybacks at static payback time, without any discounting here, for the building measures it's 5 years, and for the industrial measures it's 2 years. And calculated avoidance cost, so it's lifetime, and in this case also undiscounted avoidance cost, so investment spread over the lifetime of the measure. And it's 2.5 euro cent for building measures and 1.2 euro cent per kilowatt hour for the industrial measures. And if you compare that to current energy prices, I mean, you see it's obviously pretty economically viable measures we're talking about here in the database. Which is of course obvious because we are representing implemented project in this database. I mean, nobody would implement economically unreasonable projects. So it's some kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, of course, but that the figures are so low as presented here is quite encouraging that we have still a lot of projects out there which are comparable to them. And here in that slide you have a little bit more detailed breakdown, and you will see a lot of those graphs if you go to the deep database, so the box plots. As we're working with statistical data, we avoided working with averages and so on, but we present medians, we present quartiles, which is a bit harder to understand, but which really covers the broad statistical basis we have in our database. And so you see in the building, for the building measures, measures targeting HVAC or lighting, they have rather low payback time of 2.5 or 3 years. I'm always surprised how high the payback of lighting measures is, and we'll analyze that a bit more in detail. And it's not the technology cost mainly, but it's installation cost, which plays an important role in industry. So the technology cost is not the driving factor here, for example. And then the building fabric measures, and especially the integrated renovations, of course, have longer paybacks, which is also not surprising, but now we have statistical evidence for that, which makes it really a sound basis for the whole project. If you look at building types, and then you see quite a difference between the different sectors. So we have the distinction into the building types you see on the slide here, and you see that, for example, for the industrial projects on the slide, you have rather low payback times, and for the multifamily buildings and also public buildings, we have longer payback times. This is due to the data which is represented here. For industrial projects, we had a lot of HVAC projects, we had a lot of lighting projects in there, but for the multifamily buildings, a lot of really integrated renovations have been carried out. So this is, of course, due to the underlying data, but it's also a presentation of what is happening in the market. In industry, you have rather short-term investments in HVAC lighting, simple building installation measures, whereas in the larger in public buildings, in multifamily buildings, we have investments really in the building envelope with longer payback span, but also, of course, higher absolute savings. So those are the avoidance costs, and now it's interesting because now we talked about payback before, but the avoidance costs which take into account the lifetime of the measure, they show a slightly different picture, and you see the results are not so different anymore, and building fabric measures regarding the avoidance cost, if you assume a long lifetime of those measures, are performing with this indicator better than HVAC and lighting measures. And especially for the HVAC, we have quite a spread of measures here. You see the high bar here, so there's a huge deviation in the economic viability of the projects. But regarding the avoidance costs, they are not so different anymore. And this also shows, okay, if you take the right indicator to assess the economic performance of these projects, avoidance costs are much better than payback, because payback is a risk measure and not an economic indicator actually. You really see, there's a lot of good measures out there with avoidance costs well below the average energy costs which are underlying. We have for a couple of projects the actual financial performance compared to the expected ones, and building projects on average are perceived to perform on or slightly better than the expectations. We didn't get that much information in this indicator on the industrial projects, which is a pity because I'd have to know about that, but we didn't receive that from our data providers. And then we asked for additional benefits also in those projects. So again, for the building projects, the main additional benefit, I mean, this is a no-brainer, is carbon emissions. Okay, if you save energy, you save carbon emissions. I'm always skeptical if this is really a multiple benefit of energy efficiency, but this is, I mean, that's the main reason why you do it for some in most of the programs. But other factors like reduced maintenance, better health and safety, and so on are really considered. And we will learn more about multiple benefits, and now comes the advertisement block, with the starting Horizon 2020 projects on consideration of multiple benefits, which we're going to start on 1st of March with some of the partners present in this room here. So an industry payback of the measures, and here you see it's a lot of cross-cutting technology, compressed air, motors, cooling, and so on, but also heating, which is not only cross-cutting, but process-related measures have rather short payback times of 1 up to 3 to 4 years for the longest measures, but all measures we have seen have in the median rather low payback time, which is also again the self-fulfilling prophecy. Industry implements projects with short payback time. I mean, that's one of the major requirements. Always if you talk to the guys in industry, they say, yeah, we want to implement projects with a payback time longer than X years, and then you can set 1, 2, or 3 for the X, depending on who you're talking to. We have data on the company size in there, and we see that large and medium enterprises tend to implement shorter payback measures than micro and small enterprises. Two interpretations for that. On the one hand, there's the economy of scale, of course. Larger companies have, if they implement measures, they don't implement one motor exchange, but they exchange 100 motors, which makes the measure more economically viable. And the other explanation, which is hopefully also true, is that small and micro enterprises have different decision structures, which tend to allow longer term investments due to their ownership structures, that they are not so much looking on their yearly or half-yearly or 3-monthly balances. So it's two factors driving that, but we only see the data. I mean, the interpretation is up to you, is what you do with the data. Avoidance costs, again, pretty low for all the industrial projects here in the different categories. You always see the street lighting at the right. Street lighting projects are not the most economically viable projects compared to the other ones. Still, as you see, street lighting projects target electricity, and a lot of those other projects, like the heating project, target gas or oil as energy carriers with the different energy prices. Still, the street lighting projects are pretty much attractive projects compared to electricity prices for public authorities of much more than 20 cents in all over Europe. So gas prices not being much lower for the heating projects, it changes the economy again. So you have to compare it to your actual energy prices. Again, but there's a small count, so projects performed better than expected, but I see the overall count of the projects is only 100, so we don't know if only the 100 projects which actually performed better reported that in the database, and the other 4,900 didn't report it to us at all. So I would take that graph with a little bit of care, but talk to people in industry, and you have done so, you will see, yeah, most of the projects perform better than expected. That's at least our experience from our projects with industry, that it usually works out well. And again, the multiple benefits, also carbon reduction, but again, reduced maintenance, employee satisfaction, productivity improvement, all those factors which are considered in the decision process. Again, figures are low, and we are trying to improve especially that factor, because it's a major factor which may drive also de-risking it, not only considering energy savings, but other factors in the investment process in companies. That's just a small glimpse of what you can do. You have an analysis toolkit, and there with that toolkit you can make very free analysis with all the underlying data. You cannot download the full data set. So most of the data providers said, yeah, we give you the data, but only if you can do statistical analysis of that, but not download individual records. So you can do a lot of data in the platform itself, but you can't download the data. I'm sorry for that. To finish my presentation, I want to highlight the EEFIG underwriting toolkit. You can download it. You can also receive hard copies if you contact us via the link on the slides. And in the slides that will be uploaded, there's another 10 slides about the EEFIG underwriting toolkit, so you can read about that. But my 15 minutes are over, and so I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.